This webinar will cover the setup and configuration aspects of the new ACC API integration changes in Medtech Evolution. These changes mean that you will be able to directly submit ACC 45 and ACC 18 forms and invoices to ACC. This change impacts multiple modules across your PMS, therefore it's very important you circulate the release documentation and webinars to all staff to ensure they are informed and prepared. First, we will cover the setup of the Acc Vendor ID. The Acc Vendor ID is mandatory in order to send ACC 45, 18 and ACC invoices via APIs. ACC have decided to allow the use of providers' existing ACC provider numbers as their Acc Vendor ID. Both the ACC provider number and Acc Vendor ID are found in the staff setup. File, Options, Staff, Members, and select the staff member, and these are found under the Provider tab. During the upgrade, all existing ACC provider numbers will be automatically copied to the Acc Vendor ID field. However, if you enter a new provider, you will need to complete this yourself, ensuring that the ACC provider number and ACC Vendor ID are completed and the same. This icon here is used to associate a digital certificate to the Acc Vendor ID of the staff member, if they have been provided their own digital certificate. But if the staff member doesn't have their own digital certificate, the digital certificate configured in the location setup will be associated with the Acc Vendor ID when submitting to ACC. That's found in Location Settings. So the Acc Vendor ID field is found under Location Settings. Select your location. And under the Codes and Defaults tab. Just here. This is only applicable to practices who have previously enabled and used the ACC eSchedule functionality. For these practices, the Acc Vendor ID in staff setup will not automatically copy from the ACC provider field. If this applies to your practice, you will need to manually update the Acc Vendor ID in their staff setup. If your Acc Vendor ID field in the location setup is currently blank, please do not enter any numbers into this field. We will now move on to setting up the digital certificate. To allow ACC forms and invoices to be sent to ACC via the APIs, a digital certificate must be configured under the location or the staff setup. The digital certificate and passphrase for your practice will be provided by HealthLink. If your practice has been provided a single digital certificate for a specific location, this must be set up under the location settings here. If an individual provider has been assigned a digital certificate, this must be set up under their individual staff setup. To associate the digital certificate in either the staff or location setup, click the icon here and browse for to select the appropriate digital certificate. We will now move on to setting up Acc Contracts and Acc Services. So there are two types of Acc contracts. One is regulatory or generic contracts, and two are the non-regulatory or healthwise contracts. Regulatory contracts are the generic prices ACC will pay for services. Each regulatory contract has a contract number based on the staff role. For example, the contract number for a GP is 80, for a nurse 56, so on and so forth. The regulatory contract numbers are derived based on the ACC provider code of the income provider who is invoicing for the ACC services. The ACC provider code is found in the staff setup. So browse to find your staff member. And again under the Provider tab on the right-hand side. You need to make sure this provider code is the correct code for that staff member based on their provider type. To select the provider type, click on the ellipsis and find their provider code from the list. Non-regulatory contracts are legal contracts between ACC and an organisation who provide ACC services at defined rates. The non-regulatory contracts are set up by clicking this icon here. This is in both the staff and the location setup screens. The contract setup screen will display all ACC services configured in the PMS and their respective contract numbers. If your practice has non-regulatory contract numbers for the location, please ensure they are entered in the location setup. If an individual staff member has their own non-regulatory contract number, please ensure they're entered within that person's staff setup. However, if a service code doesn't exist in METEC Evolution, it needs to be set up first with its subsidy rate prior to entering the contract number beside the service. For instructions on how to do this, please search the knowledge base on the Insight Customer Portal. Finally, when an ACC invoice claim is generated, precedence is first given to the non-regulatory contract numbers. If these don't exist for the services, then the regulatory contract number from the income provider staff setup is used. Hence, it's imperative that all relevant staff are associated to the correct ACC provider code. We are now going to talk about automated accounts. So as part of this upgrade, a new ACC account will be created automatically for each ACC Vendor ID entered in METEC Evolution. As the staff member will have their own ACC Vendor ID, the ACC account will be created for that specific staff member's ACC Vendor ID and will be added automatically under their staff setup in the Accounts tab here. These ACC accounts will be greyed out automatically to ensure they're not replaced or removed manually. For practices that are enabled to use ACC eSchedule, the ACC account will be created for the ACC Vendor ID in the location setup. The account will be associated with all staff members that are linked to that location. The ACC accounts that have been created automatically can be searched in the Search Patient screen, and the correct ACC account can be selected to view the details under the Account Holder Account screen. This will enable viewing of all ACC invoice claim details grouped under that particular ACC account. We will now talk about the billing method for quantity-based services. So for that, we will go to the Account menu. So ACC invoices require the submission of a billing method for all services invoiced. There are 3 billing methods which ACC accept: distance, units, which is the flat fee, or time. Currently, services in METEC Evolution can be specified as a quantity base, but the billing method for these can't be defined. To enable this, a new drop-down menu has been added next to the quantity-based service checkbox in the new View Service box. When the quantity-based checkbox is ticked, this drop-down menu becomes live and you can select units, distance, or time. As part of this upgrade, existing ACC services that are configured as a quantity-based service will have a default selection of the billing method set. For further information on this, please refer to the full release notes.